A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is your Captain Hashmi speaking from the bridge.
And a warm welcome again to all our guests who embark today in Southampton. I hope you're settling in well and finding your way around the ship and exploring all the facilities Queen Mary II has to offer. And for our in-transit guests who came over from New York, I hope you had an enjoyable day here in Southampton. Well, I'm pleased to say, ladies and gentlemen, we now have all our guests on board and all our departure checks are complete. Our scheduled departure is in about 15 minutes from now at 4:15. We're just waiting for an inbound car carrier vessel to manoeuvre ahead of us, and once she's manoeuvred, we'll be departing in about 15 minutes or so. The manoeuvre this afternoon is coming off the berth for around 100 metres or so, and then we're already pointing the right way, so we're heading out down Southampton Water and the Solent, around 25 miles out under pilotage. Just to the north of the Isle of Wight, we negotiate two large turns, 90-degree turns to starboard and then to port. And once we're clear of the east of the Isle of Wight, we'll enter the English Channel. 6 days ahead of us en route to New York, a passage speed of around 21.5 knots. Overnight tonight, we'll be following the south coast of England towards Land's End, which will pass around 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. The weather forecast, ladies and gentlemen, once we're in the English Channel and overnight, is for quite gusty wind conditions, winds up to 35 to 40 knots from the southwest, which will be on the bow, and moderate sea conditions, swell conditions of around 3 to 4 meters. So there may be a slight motion in the ship this evening and overnight, but we'll keep you as comfortable as we can. And tomorrow morning, once we're clear of Land's End, the southwesternmost point of Great Britain, we'll commence our Great Circle track. Great Circle basically means we'll be following the curvature of the Earth and is generally the shortest route from Europe to North America. I will of course update you with my regular 12 noon broadcast tomorrow, but in the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the sail away from Southampton and good afternoon to you all. Captain.
The time is now 12 o'clock noon. A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is your Captain Hashmi speaking from the bridge.
So here we are on the first day of our transatlantic crossing to New York, and since departing Southampton yesterday afternoon, we sailed initially on a southwesterly course in the English Channel off the south coast of England. And then around 7 o'clock this morning, we passed Bishop's Rock Lighthouse off the Scilly Isles, which traditionally marks the starting point of a westbound transatlantic crossing. And that's when we also altered course onto a Great Circle track for our passage, currently steering a west to northwesterly course of 282 degrees. Great Circle basically means that we will regularly be altering course in order to follow the curvature of the Earth. And this is generally the shortest route between 2 points, or as they say, as the crow flies. Our route will take us just south of Newfoundland in Canada before onwards towards New York. So our present position is latitude 49 degrees and 58 minutes north, and longitude 8 degrees and 41 minutes west. And geographically, that places Queen Mary II some 115 nautical miles south of Cork in Ireland on our starboard or right hand side. And since departing Southampton, we have now sailed 360 nautical miles at an average speed of 19 knots. And we still have 2,780 nautical miles to go to New York. For information, the depth of the Celtic Sea at present is around 130 meters or 400 feet, and in about 5 hours from now, the depth of the ocean will increase to over 2,000 meters or 6,500 feet as we pass over the end of the European continental shelf on the seabed. And now for the weather, if you've been out and about, partly cloudy at present, but more blue sky starting to show now. But we do have very strong northwesterly winds at over 35 knots, which is Beaufort force 7, giving rise to a moderate sea state. The strong winds we are currently experiencing are the remnants of Storm Benjamin that passed over Ireland and the UK a couple of days ago. Please do take care on the outer decks in these windy conditions, especially when opening the doors. Outside air temperature today, the mercury showing around 12 Celsius, which is 54 degrees Fahrenheit. The forecast for the next 24 hours is for the wind and sea conditions to remain more or less as they are now, with around 3 or 4 meter swells, but should start easing off from tomorrow late afternoon onwards as the conditions start easing as we enter an area of high pressure in the mid-Atlantic.
In the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of the navigational brief for today, and usually at noon I round off my navigational brief with a short nautical themed anecdote, and today is the origin of the expression I was already used, as the crow flies. And this expression is used to indicate the shortest distance between two places, and originates from the days when navigational equipment was not quite as sophisticated as it is today. Now, in order to get an indication of the direction of land, the ship would release a crow, which would immediately head off in the direction of the nearest land, thus giving the ship an indication as to its position. And until quite recently, including on the original Queen Mary, ships had a lookout platform positioned on the highest mast, and this was referred to as the crow's nest. Well, on that note, ladies and gentlemen, may I wish you a wonderful afternoon at sea aboard Queen Mary 2, and I look forward to seeing you around the ship. And just a reminder that the ship's clocks will go back 1 hour tonight, so 1 hour back on the clocks tonight. Thank you for your attention and a very good afternoon to you all. Captain. The time is now 12 o'clock noon. A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is your Captain Hashmi speaking from the bridge for our daily noon navigational brief on Sunday, 26th of October, day 2 of our westbound transatlantic crossing to New York. I hope you all had a comfortable night's rest with the hour back and the sea conditions having eased somewhat. We are still on our Great Circle track, currently steering a westerly course of 270 degrees, following the curvature of the Earth towards Newfoundland in Canada. And in fact, right now we're at what is called the vertex of our Great Circle track, the northernmost point of our voyage across the Atlantic. And later this afternoon, very slowly, we'll be altering course to the west-southwest, and then by tomorrow to the southwest towards Canada. And since departing Southampton, we have now sailed 815 nautical miles at an average speed of 20 knots, and we still have 2,260 nautical miles to go to New York. Our present position is latitude 50 degrees and 45 minutes north, and longitude 22 degrees and 5 minutes west. And geographically, that puts Queen Mary to around 800 nautical miles, or just over 1,400 kilometers, north of the Azores archipelago and the island of San Miguel on our port or left-hand side. And in fact, exactly the same distance from Reykjavik in Iceland on our starboard or right-hand side. For information, the depth of the Atlantic Ocean at present is around 3,300 meters, or over 10,000 feet deep, as we sail over deep canyon on the seabed. And also, just for information, at around 11 p.m. this evening, we will pass over the Mid-Atlantic Ridge on the Atlantic Ocean bed. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge is basically this constructive tectonic plate boundary between the Eurasian and American plates, and is in effect the longest mountain range in the world, stretching from the southern tip of Africa all the way to Iceland. And whilst the Mid-Atlantic Ridge is mostly underwater, portions of it have enough elevation to extend above sea level, and this is manifested with the creation of the Azores archipelago to the south of us and Iceland to the north. And now for the weather. This morning we woke up on a partly cloudy day with more blue sky visible, but this is the last half an hour or so we do have some drizzle around in the vicinity. This is the last remnants of the low pressure weather system, which we should be clearing later on this afternoon. The winds have eased off from yesterday as forecast, currently around 30 knots from the west on the bow, which is Beaufort 4-6, and a moderate sea state of around 2.5 meters or 8 feet. The outside air temperature is still similar to yesterday, mercury showing 12 Celsius, which is 54 degrees Fahrenheit. The forecast for the next 24 hours is for both the wind and sea state to noticeably decrease overnight and tomorrow as we enter an area of high pressure and fair weather looking ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of the navigational brief for today, and now for my usual noontime nautical anecdote, and today is the origin of the expression on the fiddle, which means to work some sort of scam, primarily for the benefit of the operator. Now, on board the sailing ships of yore, entertainment was perhaps not quite as sophisticated as we have on board today's modern cruise liners. Basically, anyone who could play a musical instrument was a welcome addition to the crew. The fiddle, being a popular musical instrument of the time, was much favoured by sailors. Now, should a sailor be particularly good at knocking out the old tune, he would often be excused some of the more tedious tasks required in the running of a ship, provided, of course, he played for the crew. So, it was not unheard of for a few of the likelier lads to take up the fiddle, in order to avoid some of the more unpleasant duties. In other words, to be on the fiddle. So, on that note, ladies and gentlemen, may I wish you a wonderful afternoon at Seaboard Queen Mary 2, and I look forward to seeing you around the ship. And just a reminder that the ship's clocks will go back again 1 hour tonight. Thank you for your attention and a very good afternoon to you all. Captain. The time is now 12 o'clock noon. A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is your Captain Hashmi speaking from the bridge. Fast still continuing on our great circle track here in the North Atlantic, currently steering a west-southwesterly great circle track of 258 degrees, following the curvature of the Earth, heading towards Cape Race in Newfoundland in Canada. And since departing Southampton, we have now covered 1,380 nautical miles at an average speed of 22 knots. And we have exactly 1,700 nautical miles to go to New York. Our present position is latitude 49 degrees and 53 minutes north, and longitude 36 degrees and 18 minutes west. And geographically, that puts Queen Mary 2 around 660 nautical miles southeast of Cape Farewell, which is the southernmost point of Greenland on our starboard or right-hand side. And as there's not much around us land-wise, I thought I would look skyward, and it's quite busy above the cloud base. And if you're interested, the nearest aircraft, which just flew over us a few moments ago, is a UPS Boeing 747 flight 223. It's a cargo plane flying east from Louisville in Kentucky to Cologne in Germany at 37,000 feet. And for information, the depth of the Atlantic Ocean at present is around 3,600 meters, almost 12,000 feet, as we approach a seabed area known as the Labrador Basin, having cleared the mid-Atlantic ridge just after midnight. And now for the weather, if you've been out and about on deck, quite pleasant today. Overcast skies, which should start breaking up later in the day. And as mentioned earlier, the winds have eased off as forecast, currently around 16 knots from the northwest on the starboard bow, which is Beaufort Force 4. Slight sea conditions, and as I said, making quite comfortable out on deck. Outside air temperature today, similar to yesterday, 12 Celsius, which is 54 degrees Fahrenheit. The forecast for the next 24 to 36 hours is for the fair winds and sea conditions to continue as we are now, as we're in the midst of an atmospheric high pressure, so a comfortable passage ahead. So ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of the navigational brief for today, and now for my usual noontime nautical anecdote, and today is the origin of the expression over a barrel, which refers to a person who does not have much of a choice. Now, drowning, or the potential chance of drowning, was a frequent hazard faced by those who went to sea. Now, should some careless sailor happen to fall overboard and then be fortunate enough to be rescued, one of the best methods of clearing his lungs was to place the nearly drowned person over a barrel and rock him not so gently backwards and forward. Now, as time was always at a premium on these occasions, the sailor was not given much choice in his treatment, regardless of how unwell he actually felt. It should be noted that mouth-to-mouth resuscitation had not been invented at this time, which is probably just as well, as the prospect of administering the kiss of life to a bearded, toothless man suffering from scurvy would not have been all that appealing. And that's how we got over a barrel. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, may I wish you a wonderful afternoon at sea aboard Queen Mary 2, and I look forward to seeing you around the ship. And just a reminder that there will be no clock changes tonight, so no clock changes tonight. Thank you for your attention and a very good afternoon to you all. Captain. The time is now 12 o'clock noon. A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is your Captain Hashmi speaking from the bridge for a daily noon navigational brief on Tuesday, 28th of October. I hope you all had a comfortable night's rest as we pass the halfway mark and now continue on our great circle track, currently steering a southwesterly course of 250 degrees towards Cape Race in Newfoundland in Canada. Another beautiful calm sea day as we're currently in the midst of a high pressure system. Early this morning, around 7 o'clock, we sailed over the Grand Banks of Newfoundland, which is a large, shallow underwater rise or cliff, in effect an extension of the North American continental shelf, but underwater. The depth of the ocean went from 3,000 meters and almost 10,000 feet up to currently around 100 meters only, 320 feet deep. As we sail over the Grand Banks throughout today, we will experience the cold waters of the Labrador Current, currently only around 8 Celsius, 46 Fahrenheit, streaming down from the west of Greenland, and this brings with it plenty of nutrients, making this area abundant with marine wildlife. So if you're out and about on the open decks today, do keep a good lookout for whales and dolphins, possibly later this afternoon. The cold waters of the Labrador Current coming down from Canada and Greenland, mixing with the warm waters of the Gulf Stream near the Grand Banks, is also the right ingredient for fog, which we may encounter later this evening. And if we do encounter fog later, we will have to sound the ship's foghorn every 2 minutes, which is an international maritime requirement, and I do apologize in advance for any inconvenience and thank you for your kind understanding. The Labrador Current is also notorious for icebergs, and ice up to the west of Greenland that is trapped by the thick winter frost breaks free as the ice thaws in spring. The ice is then driven south by the Labrador Current and out into the North Atlantic. Iceberg season is generally from April through to June, so we're quite safe on our current voyage. Our course, it was an iceberg that was responsible for the sinking of RMS Titanic, and as many of you have been asking, we will be passing approximately 330 nautical miles north of the last resting place of Titanic on our port left-hand side in 2.5 hours from now at 2:30 p.m. So that's passing 330 nautical miles, that's the closest we'll get, north of the last resting place of Titanic at 2:30 p.m. this afternoon. It was the Cunard liner, the Carpathia, under the command of Captain Arthur Rostron, that responded to the distress signal from Titanic and rescued over 700 passengers and crew. And if you are interested, there is more information about Cunard's involvement in the Titanic rescue on Sea Stairway on Deck 5. So back to our passage, and since departing Southampton, we have now covered 1,905 nautical miles at an average speed of 20 knots, and we still have 1,170 nautical miles to go to New York. Our current position is latitude 47 degrees and 28 minutes north, and longitude 49 degrees and 6 minutes west. And geographically, that puts Queen Mary to around 150 nautical miles east of St. John's in Newfoundland in Canada, just off our starboard or right bow. And now for the weather, generally overcast with a high altitude cloud base with some blue sky breaking through in the last couple of hours. Gentle following breeze from the northeast at 14 knots, which is Beaufort force 4, and a calm sea state. Outside air temperature slightly cooler than yesterday, but still reasonably pleasant, currently around 10 Celsius, which is 50 degrees Fahrenheit. The forecast for the next 24 hours, ladies and gentlemen, is for the wind and sea state to remain more or less as it is now, whilst we're in this high pressure area, with a chance of reduced visibility later this evening. And just looking ahead, on Thursday, we can expect an increase in wind and sea state conditions as we skirt past the low pressure weather system of Nova Scotia and the Gulf of Maine. And of course, I'll update you more at noontime tomorrow, but we'll keep you as comfortable as we can. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of the navigational brief for today. And now for my usual noontime nautical anecdote, and today is the origin of the expression hanky panky, which is a semi-light-hearted expression often used to describe inappropriate behaviour, especially involving someone of the opposite sex. Now, a century or two ago, hanky panky was the name given to a mixture of brandy and ginger, at the time rather potent and popular refreshment, particularly among the higher-ranking seagoing gentry. Having consumed several of these cocktails, perhaps at the house of some foreign dignitary, it was not unheard of for the occasional admiral to make amorous advances towards one of the guests, perhaps even the hostess. So a common means of restoring good behaviour was to stop the offenders hanky panky. So, on that note, ladies and gentlemen, may I wish you a wonderful afternoon at seaboard Queen Mary 2, and just a reminder that the ship's clocks will go back again 1 hour tonight. So the ship's clocks will go back 1 hour tonight. Thank you for your attention, and a very good afternoon to you all. Captain. The time is now 12 o'clock noon. A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is your Captain Hashmi speaking from the bridge for a daily noon navigational brief on Wednesday, 29th of October and the 5th day of our westbound transatlantic crossing to New York. We woke this morning on another fine day in the North Atlantic, having sighted land at 8:30 p.m. yesterday evening as we passed 14 nautical miles off Cape Race in Newfoundland in Canada, at which point we ended our Great Circle track and are currently steering a rum line or a straight line course now on a southwesterly heading of 250 degrees, paralleling the coast of Nova Scotia in Canada. And since departing Southampton, we have now covered 2,380 nautical miles at an average speed of 18 knots, and we still have 690 nautical miles to go to New York. Our present position is latitude 44 degrees and 40 minutes north, and longitude 59 degrees and 50 minutes west. And geographically, that puts Queen Mary 2 around 40 nautical miles north of a very low-lying island called Sable Island, on our port or left-hand side. Sable Island is a crescent-shaped sandbar in effect and only 26 miles long and 3/4 of a mile across at its widest point. As it sits in the path of most North Atlantic weather and storm systems and areas of dense fog, this has resulted in over 350 recorded shipwrecks in and around Sable Island. Today, Sable Island is a Canadian scientific and environmental conservation area, with tourism strictly limited to the island. For the rest of the day, we will continue paralleling the coast of Nova Scotia towards the Gulf of Maine, and we'll pass the city of Halifax, the birthplace of our company's founder, Sir Samuel Cunard, at 8:30 p.m. this evening, but we will be outside visual range from the land. And for your information, the depth of the Atlantic Ocean at present is still relatively shallow since we cleared the Grand Banks overnight, currently around 80 meters or 260 feet. And now for the weather, if you've been out and about on deck, quite pleasant out on deck with the following breeze, around 20 knots from the northeast. Generally overcast skies, but in the last hour or so, the cloud cover has started to break up with some more blue sky visible. Outside air temperature similar to yesterday, mercury showing 12 Celsius, which is 54 degrees Fahrenheit. The forecast for the next 24 hours is for the wind and sea state to start increasing late this evening and overnight and into tomorrow as we go through a small low pressure weather system off the US eastern seaboard. The winds may freshen to over 35 knots from a following direction, and the sea state may build to around 4 meters, which may cause a little motion in the ship tomorrow. We'll keep you as comfortable as we can, of course, but please do use the handrails when moving around the ship as required. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of the navigational brief for today, and now for my usual noontime nautical anecdote, and today is the origin of the expression slush fund, a term used to describe a pool of money that has a dubious origin. Now, on board ships before the days of refrigeration, meat was stored in wooden barrels. When the meat in a barrel was consumed, there was a residue of slurry or slush left in the barrel. This was scraped out by the ship's cook and sold on, usually for making candles. Sometimes the proceeds were used for the benefit of the ship's company, but more often for the benefit of the cook, and this led also to another expression, scraping the bottom of the barrel, and that's how we got slush fund. So, on that note, ladies and gentlemen, may I wish you a wonderful afternoon at seaboard Queen Mary 2, and I look forward to seeing you around the ship. And just a reminder that the ship's clocks will go back 1 hour tonight. Thank you for your attention and a very good afternoon to you all. Captain. The time is now 12 o'clock noon. A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is your Captain Hashmi speaking from the bridge for a daily noon navigational brief on Thursday, 30th of October, and the last day of our westbound transatlantic crossing to New York. Wonderful to see many of you out and about yesterday evening, dressed in your finery for the masquerade ball. And I trust you all had a comfortable night's rest as we continue on our southwesterly course of 235 degrees, just south of the Gulf of Maine on our starboard right-hand side, having cleared Nova Scotia in Canada overnight. And since departing Southampton, we have now covered 2,790 nautical miles at an average speed of 20 knots, and we still have 280 nautical miles to go to New York. Our present position is latitude 40 degrees and 59 minutes north, and longitude 67 degrees and 50 minutes west. And geographically, that puts Queen Mary 2 just over 100 nautical miles southeast of the Cape Cod Peninsula off her starboard or right-hand bow, and around 160 nautical miles southeast of Boston. For most of the afternoon, we will be continuing on this southwesterly heading, and at around 3 p.m. we will enter the Nantucket Fairway, which is like a motorway or highway for ships approaching New York. The Nantucket Fairway runs almost parallel with Long Island for a final approach into New York. The depth of the Atlantic Ocean, for information at present, is relatively shallow, only around 50 meters deep or 160 feet, as we sail over a seabed area known as George's Bank. And now for the weather, if you've been out and about, especially in the last hour, the cloud cover has broken up and we have lovely sunny skies now, even though we did start with an overcast morning. The winds are gentle, following wind from the northeast at 12 knots, which is Beaufort force 3 to 4, and a slight sea state, but low swell. Outside air temperature slightly warmer than yesterday, mercury showing around 15 Celsius, which is 59 degrees Fahrenheit. The forecast for the rest of the evening, as briefly mentioned yesterday, is for the winds to freshen and sea state to increase later this evening as we pass through a small weather system off the US eastern seaboard, with associated rain showers into the early hours of tomorrow morning. And then tomorrow morning we plan to embark our pilot for New York at the Ambrose Light at 3:45 a.m. in the early hours, and then it's a 25-mile transit up the Hudson to our berth at the Brooklyn Cruise Terminal. Of course, sailing into New York is one of the most spectacular sail-ins into any port, and if you do want to enjoy the sights, the approximate times of us passing under the Verrazano Narrows Bridge is at 5 a.m. and approaching the Statue of Liberty on our port left-hand side at approximately 5:30. So that's passing under the Verrazano Narrows Bridge at approximately 5 o'clock tomorrow morning, and the Statue of Liberty half an hour later at 5:30. And that should have us alongside between 6:30 and 7 o'clock. The timings are also displayed on your passenger information channel on TV. The weather for our call to New York tomorrow is for a little wet start in the morning, but should brighten up shortly after arrival with a sunny outlook throughout the day, with temperatures tomorrow reaching a high of around 11 Celsius, which is 51 degrees Fahrenheit, and a little breezy. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of the navigational brief for today, and now for my usual noontime nautical anecdote, and today is the origin of the expression, scratch my back. Now, you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours may seem like an obvious expression, but again, we have to thank the British Navy for its origin. Now, in the days when flogging with a cat o' nine tails was common, shipmates generally administered the punishment to each other. The marks left after each stroke of the cat were known affectionately as scratches, a misnomer if ever there was one. Now, when one sailor was due a flogging, he would often say to the person appointed, "If you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours." Now, this could mean one of two things. If the person was heavy-handed, he could expect the same treatment if and when his turn for flogging came. Or if the person was kind and light-handed, that favour would be returned at a later date. And that's how we got scratch my back. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, may I wish you a wonderful afternoon at seaboard Queen Mary 2, and I would like to take this opportunity on behalf of myself, the entire ship's company, and all of us at the Cunard line to wish all our guests disembarking tomorrow a safe onwards journey home. And thank you for allowing us to take care of you during your time on board, and we look forward to welcoming you aboard a Cunard liner in the not too distant future. And for our 415 in transit guests who will be sailing back to Southampton with us, the all on board time for you is 4 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. And just a reminder that the ship's clocks will go back again 1 hour tonight. Thank you for your attention and a very good afternoon to you all. Captain.